Hello everyone, this is Diane and this is a special video. This is part of a collaboration with 3 other YouTubers, slash junk journalers. And I am friends with all of these lovely ladies and I'm so excited to be a part of this collaboration. Of course, I'm one of the people in the collaboration. Gail Agostinelli, who is a dear sweet friend of mine, is also part of it. And we have Nancy from Canada. Nancy Rose, I think, is her YouTube channel. Her name is Nancy Rose Singer. And she's the one who had the idea to do this and asked me to join her, and who else would I like to join us. And so Carol Laws was another one that I thought of, and she is in the UK. So the 4 of us decided that we would do projects using vintage fabrics. We are calling this collaboration a different point of view because we're all using vintage fabrics, but we're all going to use our own point of view. None of us knows what the other ones are doing. So if there may be a duplicate, if someone is making what I'm making, theirs will look entirely different. It will have a different take. It will have a different point of view. So we were supposed to make 2 projects. I've had my vintage fabrics out and playing around and trying to think of something that I could do that was a little bit different but wouldn't take too long. I don't tend to do complicated embellishment. I want to concentrate on making the journals, and I do enjoy making embellishments, but I don't want things that are too complicated. So I think that the things that I'm making are going to be fairly simple. I'll show you a couple things that I played around with before I finally decided on what I would do. I have an index card here and I just collaged some pieces of vintage fabrics on there, and then cigarette card, vintage cigarette card. This is pretty similar to something that's been done, but it's still a very fun thing to do with vintage fabric, and then you can stitch it on as a pocket in your journal. Another thing that I did was I took this piece of embroidered linen. It was never finished. The edges were still raw, and I don't think the embroidery was done. Yeah, there's still some spaces that should have been filled. So I cut one of the embroidered sections, which was a cherry, and took some of the blank linen because it's a really nice fabric. And I made this little booklet. I folded it up and made it into a pocket, and then sewed this vintage rickrack onto it. I sewed the little square with the embroidery on it, and then added some vintage fabric and vintage lace with some gingham ribbon in there. But I didn't put anything in the pocket yet because I decided I had thought about making this my project, but I'm showing it to you as a possibility for something you could do. I have a different project in mind for today. I also had pulled out this vintage linen that I thought would make a good booklet like that, because I could fold that up and make it the pocket. But what I ended up with were, try to keep things organized here. I made some little pockets with time cards. For these 2, I folded the time card up and I stitched vintage fabric on it and collaged and did some vintage milk bottle caps. And then I made tags to put in there. You could make whatever you want to put inside. I topped this one with some vintage rickrack, and this one has a cigarette card on it. You could decorate the tags if you want to. I was going to, but then I decided to decorate the back of the card instead and leave the tags plain, and I will put some seam binding in them. You can write on the back of the tags, of the cards, and you can write on the tags. You could glue the tags down into your book, so of course you could still write here and still on the tag. There's lots of possibilities for this. And this one I left long and just sewed a pocket, a piece of fabric on it to form a pocket. Look at that funky 70s fabric. The colors, the images, it's pretty funky. I cut a little piece out here and sewed it to the top. And then I found this vintage trim that I have. It was just the perfect color, and then I added some rickrack. And then this one is another vintage fabric with some gingham here and some cheesecloth and another bottle cap. I didn't collage on this because I wanted the picture to be there. So we're going to do one of each of those. I hope it doesn't take too long. These are the vintage fabrics that I had pulled to try to decorate these items with. So I have, to save time, I already have the fabrics and embellishments selected. So we'll do this one first. I inked the time card, and I'm folding this one so that the back of the card is going to be here. I think it's fun to write on that side. So before we sew the pocket, we adhere the decorations. So this is a piece of vintage fabric. It's quite old and thin, so I didn't want to make this the pocket itself, so I'm using this one to sew it to the card. And it's so thin you can see the lines on the time card through it. I have glue on my fingers. So I am going to sew this little piece of fabric to the folded up part of the time card. You could use a different color thread and a fancy stitch. I'm just using a zigzag and white thread. I was thinking it would be fun to use a red thread when I sew the pocket up and sew all the way around the card, even though you don't need to sew around the card, just for decoration. But I've been working on these and it's already 6 p.m. So I'm not going to take time to change my thread at this time. I have to make a few more of them, so I might do it. I don't have anything in mind for these particular cards. I'll just put them in my stash for when I need an embellishment. I have this vintage applique that I got at the flea market, and I thought that looked really pretty. It's kind of an empty space there. It's green dots, but it looks empty. So I'm going to put that there. And I had this piece of, this is not vintage, but just a piece of trim from Hobby Lobby that I had up there. And just a little scrap of fabric just to add a little bit of color here behind the flower. We can glue these or sew them. I think that I will sew the trim and then glue the other things. There we go. So you don't have to sew any of this. You could glue the fabric to the pocket. Just because you're doing projects with vintage fabric, or it doesn't even have to be vintage. If you don't have vintage fabric, you can use new fabric, whatever scraps you have around. I know I have fabric scissors over here, but I kind of misplaced them. I have 2 pairs up here, so I just grabbed some from the other side of the table. All I have right here is pinking. Oh, there they are. They were hiding. Okay, so now I'm going to glue these pieces down with my 3-in-1 by Beacon, same makers of Fabri-Tac. I'm curious to know what Carol and Nancy and Gail are making. Nancy gave us a sneak peek. I think it was Nancy, yeah. Nancy gave us a sneak peek. Pictures of what she's created, and oh, it's beautiful. So I will be linking their videos in the description of this video, so you can, after you watch mine, go see theirs. Or if you've come from their channel, thank you for coming over. And we thought this would be a great way for subscribers to our channels to meet some of our friends. Do I need to do anything else to this? Not right now. I'm just going to sew this together. And I'm going to use the straight stitch. Just because It doesn't take up as much room as a zigzag, so it allows for your tag to slip in and out better. It's kind of a narrow pocket. And I already had the tag made, except I didn't put the seam binding in it. Let me show you what I brought over for vintage embellishments to decorate these with. I brought some milk bottle tags. This is an orange juice, cap. This is vintage applique. I could trim those apart and use that. I have some cigarette cards. I have some coat room checks. And I even have this tiny little milk bottle cap. Oh, I think this is a Tim Holtz one. It's not genuine. And I had one of these. I've got a lot of these little bird cards, but I thought one of them might work on one of the larger ones, but I didn't use one. But just to give you some ideas of what you can use to embellish, or whatever you have in your stash. Okay, so, oh, I brought it over to see if I needed to put something on this tag to decorate it. That looks cool. I like that. I'll just go with the coat check. I'm just going to glue it on. I think I got these coat room check tickets from an Etsy seller, but I don't remember who. I know it's not something I found by myself. Same with the cigarette cards. I found them on eBay. We don't find them in the US. They get them for really good prices in the UK. Okay, so that one's done. One of them I punched the edges with a decorative punch just for something different. And now I will do this one. I already had this vintage fabric selected, a coat check ticket, and a little piece of lace, and then this fabric, vintage lace too. The other project, the second project that I have, is what's going to take longer. I'm going to sew along both edges so that the points of the petals don't flip up. I'm going to sew this fabric down and then glue the coat check. Well, I think I'll sew that too. The thing with the glue, once you put it on here, or even if you don't put it on there, I had it already sewn on and then glued items. Glued these things to it, and then the glue seeped through, and I had to pull the glue off of the back of the card. So then you could glue it before you sew it on, but then you have to wait for the glue to dry before you sew it. But that doesn't take very long. But you know, I'm impatient, and we're kind of in a hurry. So we're just going to sew this on. Moderately straight. I love to watch Nancy's haul videos. She apparently has a stall or a booth in a vendor's secondhand place or antique mall or something. So she buys things to put in her booth, but she buys junk journal products too, like vintage papers and stuff. She finds the coolest stuff. I mean, I know I find really cool stuff too, but I love watching her videos. Like I said, she's in Canada. Going back to the straight stitch here. So I think I started watching her channel because of her hauls. She also has some really great ideas for making things. So she makes pretty journals and pretty embellishments. So I'm excited to see what she has to make. And Carol, I met her through, we were both on Studio 28E's design team. And she makes lovely journals. And she's in the UK. So I'm excited to have her as part of this team too. I hope you'll go check them both out. And Gail, anybody that's subscribed to my channel is probably already subscribed to Gail. But if you're not, go over there and check out Gail. She does a video pretty much every day. At least one. And she's fun to watch, fun to listen to. She's a sweet lady and I love her. I'm going to meet her one day. We talk about it. She lives in Montana and I'm in Pennsylvania, so there's quite a distance between us. So these are the two little pockets we made with vintage fabric and time cards and vintage embellishments or whatever else you have. I just made my tags out of craft cardstock. So that was fun and pretty quick. So the second project I'm going to do is this little booklet. Let me show you the one that's completed. It's this little booklet. I took some, well, I will show you what I did, but I have 6 traveler's notebooks that I'm going to be working on as my next project, and they're not all the same. 2 of them have the same theme. This one I have to glue the buttons to. So these 2 are from the same theme, and then this one is from a theme by itself. I love the colors on that, and the back of it is decorated too. On all of them. Should I show you the backs of these? See that there's some plissé fabric. Can you see the texture that I stitched to it, and then I just appliqued fabrics and laces to it. And then there were some puckers in the back, or maybe the edge of the cardstock was showing here, so I just did a little bit on the backs to cover things up. I have to trim the paper, it's a little bit long here, so I will trim that and add the buttons. And then there are 3 journals, traveler's notebooks, that are going to be made with this, and they'll all have the same theme. It's pretty much the same color palette. So I pulled out some fabrics. What I did was I cut cardstock, white cardstock, 3.5 inches by 10 inches, and then folded it. You could cut it and fold it so it opens like a book, but I did these this way. I took some coffee dyed muslin and I just kind of held this onto the fabric and then made a little snip in it where I needed it and then ripped it. I don't like to measure, and you can see there's a little pucker there, so I'm going to cover that up with an applique. Other than that, it looks, oh, and there's this little corner didn't get covered, so I'll have to put something down there too for sure. And then I have 2 more. I have to make 3 more for those journals, but we're only going to do 1 on this video. I was going to have everything done except for 1 so that you could watch me make it, but I'm running out of time tonight. So I pulled out fabrics that will go with these colors, and not all of them are vintage. These are vintage, but I had a harder time finding vintage fabrics in the right colors. And I have some vintage lace up here. So I'm just going to start cutting and arranging. Ouch. I just hit my sewing machine with my fist. That might be too big, but we'll cut it. Yeah, it's definitely too big. I just lay things on until, and then just move them around until I like what I see, and then I start sewing it down. Find some lace. No, I like it on top. I think I like this brown ribbon with the kind of pinky dots on it. I do want part of the muslin to show. It's wrinkled and coffee dyed, and I like that texture to show. But I think I need something here. Well, I will be putting buttons on it too. Pull this out a little further. And I will have a strip up here wrapped around the top, so that'll add a little something to it. What do I want here? This is just my little tin of tiny scraps and pieces of lace. Oh, this is pretty. This is a little chocolate brown lace. It's not vintage. That was a gift from Ooh La La Crafts. Christy, sorry. Okay, I think that's good enough, and then I'll add some sort of embellishment to it. We'll see. Let's just sew this on. So you can just like put some glue in the middle of these and then sew, but I just start sewing around. You'll see, the sewing just goes all over. And I forgot to show you the inside of my things that I made. Only one of them got finished on the inside. But I covered up the stitching. The wind has been blowing like crazy here the last 2 days. Very high gusts of wind, and my power has flickered and gone out several times. Just for a few seconds. but I can still hear the wind. I had to go out and run errands today. My hair was just whipping around. But I like windy days. Unfortunately, it was too cold to actually be out in it. It was a cold wind. I like going for walks on windy days when it's not that cold. There really isn't anything that needs to be covered on the back side because the things that needed to be covered are on this side. So I don't have to do anything to the back if I don't want to, and since we're doing a video, I probably won't do anything on the back. So I'm going to pick a fabric to go here. Maybe I'll do some of this burgundy again. So that way I'm using just vintage fabrics, not any of the newer ones. I still have 2 of these booklets to make. I can use some of those newer fabrics for them, since that won't be part of the tutorial or collaboration or whatever. So I'm just going to cut a narrow, it's probably about an inch wide, and then, oh good, there's enough for the color to be on both ends, and then I'll just cut off the excess. And I flipped it over so that I can see the center line. And I'm going to stitch down the center line with a straight stitch. And then I'm just going to glue the loose parts. When it's dry, I'll trim that a little bit off. I'm going to pick out some buttons to put on there. I have a hard time getting red and like burgundy colored vintage buttons, and even pink. I just have a hard time finding them. Look at that pretty flower shaped one. Pale pink, can you see it? Kind of clear, I like that. So those are the buttons. I'll have to put some floss in them and figure out where I want them. But I also have to sew the paper inside, and let me show you what I did to cover the stitching. This is the first one I made, and I just cut some yellow paper and glued it to the front covers, and I haven't done it on the other books yet. So I took some, where are they? Some of this grid paper that I have. It's a vintage grid paper. And I took 3 sheets of it and cut it. This is 3.5 inches, so I cut this 3. Did I cut it 3 or 3 1/4? 3¼ This is cut 3¼ inches, and then I cut it just a little bit shorter than the length of this. This would be 5 inches. Obviously I didn't cut it shorter. I'll have to trim that. So this is 3½ by 5. So this is 3¼ and it should be 4 3/4 in length, but I will trim that even after I sew it in. You can sew the paper in before you sew the fabric to the top, or you could even just glue the fabric to the top and cover up the stitching there. So now there's a little booklet. Just have to trim the bottom and figure out where I want my buttons. It's cute. I like it. And then you can tuck it into a pocket in your journal. There's my floss. I didn't even thread my needle for the floss. I think I have it out here somewhere, the color that I want. Well, I'll get another one. I just used a neutral color. This one. I just take the floss and stick it in the hole. Maybe. And then pull it back up through the other hole and tie it in a knot. It's pretty simple unless you're all thumbs like I am today, apparently. So there's one. And then I would go ahead and do the other two. This one, of course, has 4 holes, so I would use all 4 holes before I tie the knot. So let me pick out a piece of paper, and we'll do that part. I still have time here. That's one thing I didn't do. Get my inside paper ready. I'm wondering if one of these blacks in this pad would work. Here's the black. I think I like that striped one. Definitely not those giant dots. Or that Argyle. These are kind of masculine cardstocks that I'm using for the covers. So I'll do that. Okay, so as I said, the covers are 5 inches up and down and 3½ inches across. So I'm going to cut this just slightly smaller than that. Very slightly smaller, sorry. So this part will be up and down. I must have used my ATG tape. I don't think I used my glue for that because it would have warped it. Well, I just ran out of tape, but that's okay because that was just what I needed. And there we have it. There's a little booklet. It will have buttons on it. So let's take a look at everything. Those buttons and these buttons. I like the colors on this one. And I have this one, and there will be two more in that color scheme. And where's our other project? We did these. And all of these are made with vintage fabric. And if you don't have vintage fabric, of course you can use new fabric. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for coming over to my channel from the other ladies' channels. And I hope that you will make sure you visit all 4 ladies in this collaboration. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.